All right, so in section 9.4, we learned how to solve a quadratic equation using a graph. And there are actually several different ways that we can solve a quadratic equation. The next one what we're going to learn today, is something called the quadratic formula. All right, so the solutions of the quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, can be found using the quadratic formula. And once again, when we do the quadratic formula, we're using the a, the term in front of the x squared, as our a, term in front of the x is our b, and then the constant term or just number that's by itself as our c. And it fits into this complicated looking equation here, which says that our x value is going to be equal to the negative value of our b, so, or the opposite of our b, plus or minus. Remember, if we have a positive over a negative or an addition sign over a negative sign, that's read as plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and then we divide all of that by 2 times a. Now, in order to remember that, you kind of put this formula to music, sing it like it's Pop Goes the Weasel. So something like x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Right. That's about the only time you're going to get me to sing in class or on a video. So if you sing that over and over again, then eventually you'll just have it memorized and you'll know what the quadratic formula is and be able to write it out whenever you need to solve a quadratic equation. All right, so we have this equation here, x squared plus 5x minus 6. So identify our a, b, and c. A is in front of the x squared, nothing there, so we assume that's a 1. B is what's in front of the x, which is a 5. And c is the term, or the number by itself, which is negative 6. And we do include the sign in front of those. All right, so from there, if we plug it into the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So negative b, so negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 5 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 6, over 2 times the a, which is 1. So we have all of that information. Now we just have to break it down and simplify it. So negative 5, we haven't done anything with it. It's still there. Plus or minus. Now we're going to work inside the square root. 5 squared is 25. And we have negative 4 times 1 times negative 6. So 2 negatives is going to make that a positive. And 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 6 is 24. And that's going to go over 2 times 1, which is 2. And keep breaking it down. So negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 24, which is 49, over 2. So plus or minus means that this actually represents 2 possible equations. Right? Now, square root of 49, hopefully we know the square root of 49. It's going to be 7. So this simplifies to negative 5 plus or minus 7 over 2. And in order to figure out what those actually simplify to, we're going to break that into the two equations that plus or minus represents. So it's going to be x equals -5 plus 7 over 2. -5 plus 7 is 2 over 2, or 1 is one of our solutions. And the other one, we're going to do the minus version. So -5 minus 7 over 2. -5 minus 7, they're both negatives, so we add them and keep the negatives. -12 over 2 is going to give us -6. So there's our two solutions. All right, so let's do it one more time with this next example. -3x squared plus x equals -5. Now, in order to use the quadratic equation, quadratic formula, we have to have it set equal to 0. So we got to move this -5 over to the other side. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. So now we have -3x squared plus x plus 5 equals 0. Identify our a, b, and c. A is in front of the x squared, which is -3. B is in front of the x. We don't have a number in front of it, so we assume it's a 1. And c is the 5. Now we're going to plug it into the equation there. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So -b is -1 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 1 squared, minus 4 times the a, which is -3, times the c, which is 5. That's going to go over 2 times a, which is 2 times -3. Keep working it there. It's going to be -1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared, which is 1. -4 times -3, it's going to be 12, and 12 times 5 is going to be 60. And 2 times -3 is -6. So keep simplifying it. -1 plus or minus the square root. 1 plus 60 is 61 over -6. So if we break that down to the two possible answers, then it's going to be the same thing as -1 plus the square root of 61 over 6, or -6, I should say. Now, since we have a negatives on top and bottom, this negative on the bottom is dividing everything up there. So that's actually going to make us change the signs. So we're going to end up with -1 over -6 is going to be +1. That addition is going to become a subtraction. So 1 minus the square root of 61 over 6. And the other option is our x equals -1 minus the square root of 61 over -6. Once again, we have a negative on the bottom. It's going to change the signs above it. So x equals +1 plus the square root of 61 over +6. So there's our two possible solutions there. If you wanted to, you could get the calculator and work through there to get an actual number on that, but in most cases, that would be sufficient. All right, so that is using the quadratic formula.